Welcome to Code 44. If you're listening today as a spouse, a parent, a partner, or someone who loves a law enforcement officer, today's episode is extremely difficult, but it's also an important one because today isn't about statistics or headlines or even tragedy. It's about connection. It's about the moment that happens quietly at home. The subtle shifts, the silence, the things that we feel, but we just can't quite name them. The moments where something feels off, but we don't know if it's enough to actually say something, or if by saying something is just going to make it worse. So before we begin, I want to be very clear of our intentions. This conversation is not about shame, and it's not about dissecting the past. This conversation is about learning. It's about awareness and giving spouses and families permission to trust their instincts, to speak up with love, and to support their loved one before the line breaks. On this episode, I am joined by someone who knows this life very deeply. She's not an expert, she's not a clinician, but she is a spouse. She's a woman that walked through the unthinkable. And instead of retreating to silence, she has chosen to use her voice so that other families might not have to learn this the hard way. She is a mother of two beautiful children, baby girls, and a widow of Jared Ulinski, a dedicated sergeant with the Ohio State Highway Patrol who served for over 22 years. He also died by suicide nearly 5 years ago. She's here to share what she has learned, what she wishes she would have known, and what she wants you to hear if you are listening right now with a quiet knot in your chest. If at any point during this episode you need to pause, or step away, or just take a deep breath, please do so. Your health as a spouse matters too. And if you're listening today and thinking, this feels really familiar, or I see pieces of this in my own life, I want you to remember this. You are not alone. You are not overreacting, and you are not imagining things. This is Code 44, where we learn to recognize the signs. We respond with awareness, and we support the ones we love before the line breaks. So let's begin. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you for having me, Amy.
Absolutely. This is a really tough conversation, but I'm so excited to have you here to talk to law enforcement spouses across the country. And thank you for being so vulnerable and so open. And we're just so appreciative of you being here.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to share my story.
So before we jump in, can you tell us just maybe a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm 30 years old. I'm a mom of two beautiful daughters, Nora and Piper. They're crazy. They're fun. They keep me entertained and busy for sure.
Yes.
They take up a majority of my time.
Yes.
And when I was 21 years old, I started dispatching for the Highway Patrol, which is where I met my amazing husband, Jared. After nearly 5 years together, I unfortunately lost him to suicide. So I'm just hoping that this conversation helps somebody else.
Absolutely. And thank you so much again for sharing your story. So at any point, any of this feels heavy, please, you don't have to share. Just whatever you feel is important for other spouses to know, or anything you wish you would have known, is really what we want to talk about today. So before everything kind of changed for you, how would you describe your life with Jared?
I would say it was relatively normal. I mean, besides working opposite shifts sometimes, both as first responders, we We did all the same things normal couples do. Uh,
Mhm.
you know, made dinner together, taking the kids back and forth from practices, school, or whatnot. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was anything. I mean, that was just life. It seemed
Mhm.
normal because that's all we were used to.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about you were a dispatch, so you knew the life for sure, and you
Yeah.
lived the life for sure of law enforcement. But what did that look like being a spouse of a law enforcement officer for you?
Um, I think since being a first responder myself,
Mhm.
nothing was sugar coated. I knew
Mhm.
what these men and women were doing on a daily basis. I was sending them to specific calls I knew that could potentially stick with them for the rest of their lives. I mean, sometimes just the call themselves like sticks with me and I'm not even there having to um see it. That was
Yeah.
definitely hard knowing something was dangerous and you're cuz I did work with Jared before we got
Mhm.
married. We were allowed to work at
Mhm.
the same post, so I would be knowingly sending him to critical incidences. So I think then as a spouse waiting at home,
Mhm.
um, I knew the potential dangers that there were. A lot of
Yeah.
other spouses, if they're not in that type of environment daily, they can kind
Mhm.
of be oblivious and, ignorance is bliss. It's nothing
Yeah.
against them. It's just, fortunately and unfortunately, I knew both sides of it. So
Yeah.
it was definitely a bit stressful.
Absolutely. And it gives you such a great perspective for us. I often say I can imagine what my spouse is enduring throughout the
Hmm.
day and the things that they're seeing. But to me, that's all still just fictional because I don't really see what's going
Yeah.
on. But for you, you had that firsthand information of knowing exactly what Jared was walking through.
Yeah.
Did you start to see things in Jared that you thought was maybe just part of the job? It's a common phrase that we sometimes classify symptoms that we're seeing in our law enforcement officers. Were there things that you were seeing that you thought, yep, it's just because of the job?
Yeah, definitely. I would say when he'd come home from work after an especially like busy shift, he wouldn't want to talk. A lot of times he would just go to the gym. He'd be there a couple hours, take a long afternoon nap. It was just silence. And I'd asked him about it before, and he's like, well, you listen to radio traffic all day. You're talking to people all day. When you come home, you don't want to talk. And I didn't really
Mhm.
question it much or push much after that because it made sense. I'm thinking, I'm on the radios or phones all day. I don't want to talk to anybody either.
Yeah.
And I definitely like noticed that I had conversations with other people at work and stuff, and they're like, yeah, when I get home, I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to be in my own head type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I can see where that subtle little shift might have been a little bit of a concern, but I think all of us in our jobs, whatever our occupations are, we're exhausted at the end of the day. Or, like you said, if we're on the phone or talking to
Yeah.
people all day, we're just thinking, okay, well, he's just kind of processing it. Looking back now, were there any other subtle shifts that maybe you saw in him start to take place?
Um, Not so much until after COVID had started.
Hmm.
During that time, he had worked for the mobile field force unit, so they were like sent down to Columbus to guard the state house for weeks at a time. He'd be
Hmm.
working 14, 16-hour days, 6 days a week,
Hmm.
only coming home for like 24 or 36 hours, at a time.
Hmm.
That was all the time we'd get together and he'd be sent
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
Um, I did notice when he'd come back, like, he would not want to do anything or he'd be drinking more.
Hmm.
And then I think back, maybe the drinking was always an issue.
Mhm.
but at this time I was newly pregnant, so I obviously wasn't drinking with him. It was more noticeable when you're the
Yeah.
sober one.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say there was a shift in that, but sometimes him just being silent was him wanting to hold me on the couch and not talking. So the silence wasn't always bad,
Yeah.
but it was definitely noticeable.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk a little bit about the drinking, and I want to talk about that one for a little bit more because sometimes as a spouse, I think our alarm only goes off if the drinking is excessive, right? And they're
Yeah.
always drunk. And then we're like, oh my gosh, something's wrong. But I don't know if that's reality. I remember Mike sharing with me through his journey. He said, Gentleman Jack was his best friend. It's a whiskey, but it started just with, a half a glass of,
Mhm.
of whiskey, just a real small one. And then that one small one led into two. And so we should probably pay attention a little bit earlier of
Yeah.
not necessarily how much drinking they're doing, but is it slowly increasing in time? And just because they're not drunk doesn't mean that there's not a
Yeah.
problem. Would
Yeah, for sure. And I would say it wasn't like a starting out drinking every night type thing, but it'd
Yeah,
be 1 to 2 nights a week or just on his time off. That would
yeah.
gradually increase. And yeah, like you said, 1 drink led to 2 drinks. And I think a lot of people think drinking is like leads to arguing and fighting and everything like
Mhm.
that to notice it's an issue.
Mhm.
Jared was not like that. He was not like that sober. He was not like that drunk. He was a very kind, soft-spoken person that didn't change when he drank. If anything, he got sleepy and, would go to
Mhm.
bed. It was so I guess for me I thought if if he wasn't having a bad reaction to it or, treating me any differently, it wasn't that
Yeah.
big of a deal.
Yeah. I even think back to there would be days where I knew Mike was coming home. It was before we were married, and he would say, I've had a really bad day, and I would have a glass of whiskey waiting for him. And now looking back at that, I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, what was I doing?
Yeah.
But I mean, I think we're being honest here, and I'm sure that
Yeah.
there's spouses out there listening and they're like, "Oh no, I may be doing that." And not that
Yeah.
that's bad and wrong, but something to be aware of.
No, for sure.
You talked a little bit about what the silence looked like in your home, and I'm going to ask you to expand on that a little bit more because I think this is one, if I had to make a guess, all of us as spouses feel. We feel the silence, and the silence looks different and the same for all of us. And so you mentioned, laying on the couch, being together. That's a great silence. What else did the silence feel like to you?
Um, it was I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It could be really challenging, especially like having young kids at the time. I'm like trying to communicate and wanting to talk about what's going on or asking for
Hmm.
help and he's just like and he was always a hands-on husband and dad. So towards the
Hmm.
end like him retreating a little bit and not being as helpful, I guess. It was odd because that wasn't who he
Hmm.
was. So
Hmm.
for him to just sit back and kind of watch me do everything without him helping, that's a different form of silence.
Mm.
Or just a noticeable shift in his behavior.
Hmm.
Um, sorry, I need a second.
No, please take your time.
um, Another part of the silence was definitely the sleeping more. He would complain about having trouble sleeping, but he would be in bed for a long time. Like he'd go to
Wow.
bed early and when he'd come home from work, if he wasn't going to the gym right away, he'd go and take a nap. At that time it didn't seem that big of a deal because we had a newborn, so I'm like, well, if she's
Mhm.
napping and he's napping, I'm gonna take a nap, like cool.
Yeah.
Um, but thinking back on it to the beginning of our relationship, he was never like that. He didn't he didn't shut down. He didn't sleep his days away. And, now in hindsight, like having
Mhm.
dealt with depression and anxiety myself, sleeping is like a way that I like to cope. So
Mhm.
seeing that that's what he did, it really wasn't, it's not that surprising now.
Yeah. Yeah. Hindsight's always 2020, right?
Yeah.
We can always identify it later. So you talked a little bit about the withdrawal, the change in the sleep, the mood. Did you feel any emotional distance or conflict between the two of you that just wasn't understandable?
Not necessarily. Uh, I would say we had a relatively easy marriage. We
Mhm.
rarely fought, which I mean, it's great. um,
Yeah.
but now I'm thinking, maybe he was just protecting me from some of these things, and
Mhm.
that's why it was
Mhm.
so easy. And I don't know. I do harbor a lot of guilt from the fact that maybe I was just too busy with everything to notice. Because he was definitely the type of person that if he noticed a shift in my behavior, he was hounding me and asking me the questions. He wouldn't go to bed if I was angry until like we got to the bottom of it.
Mhm.
So I definitely wish I would have pushed more for that.
These are tough. I'm
Yeah.
having a hard time holding it together. One of the things that you said hits me hard because when I talk to other spouses, you talked about the naive innocence, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
we feel like unless things are really bad at home, maybe they're not struggling. And what I heard you say was our marriage was really good and we
Yeah.
didn't fight and we didn't have issues. And I'm hoping that's one of the takeaways. We don't want to be over dramatic and be like the sky is always falling if you're
Mhm.
married to a law enforcement officer, because that's not the case. And that's not what I want people to take away from this. But I also want spouses to take away that even if things feel amazing and safe, and they are, there's still the trauma that our loved ones are facing on a daily basis that
Yeah.
we've gotta be aware of those silent shifts, and you
Yeah.
described, a lot of them. Did you ever get to a point leading up to, his suicide where you felt like something was wrong, but you just didn't know how to say it or how to get that help?
Um, a little bit. Not to the point where I ever thought he would take his own life. Just
Mhm.
because he was so religious. That was something I had it was just never an option, and that was something he had
Mhm.
made super clear. Um, but a few weeks leading up, I had noticed his anxiety had worsened, and like this is kind of an odd thing to notice, but and I don't know if your husband's the same, but Jared ate so fast. Like, he's scarfing it down. He says that's from being in the academy, they'd be given 3 minutes to eat their entire dinner. And I noticed it with other officers. They eat so fast. Those last couple days, especially the night before, I remember we were eating mini tacos on the couch, and he's just eating them so slow, like staring off into the distance. It was like kind of weird. And I'm
Wow.
even like, what's wrong? Are they not good? And he's like, no, like brushing it off. Um,
Mhm.
and again, it didn't seem like that big of a deal at the time, until now looking back. And then, like, during that time, actually, as he's eating these super slow and on his phone, I had later found out that was the time he was writing his suicide note to me. And
Ugh.
that just is like, it's like I was sitting 4 feet away from him on the couch and he's doing this and I didn't notice. Like, there's just, there's still some guilt there. I would say it was definitely a
Mhm.
lot harder at first. It's taken a lot of hours and hours in therapy, to kind of move past that, but it just goes to show you truly don't know. And you can
Yeah.
ask, but they also have to be willing to share.
I know you shared with me in our previous conversation about, I think it was 2 weeks earlier that you and him were having a conversation. I think you were sitting by poolside and he made a comment to you. Would you be willing to share that on the podcast?
Yeah. And actually that was only so that was the Thursday before, Wednesday or Thursday
Okay.
before. So 2 or 3 days before.
Okay.
We're sitting on the edge of the pool. Piper's in her little floaty thing. We're just watching her. Like it was it was such a good summer night. And out of nowhere he's like, the only time I ever thought about suicide was um after my divorce from my first wife. He's like, but our life now is so good. And, we just had Piper. Like, he's like, I cannot imagine ever doing that. Um, and we talked about, like, we talked about everything. So for him to say that, it was a little random, but
Uh-huh.
it wasn't like, oh my God, like he's thinking of killing himself. Um,
Right.
Nothing like that. So
Mhm.
now it's like, okay, him saying that, was he trying to convince me he was okay and
Uh-huh.
not going to hurt himself, or was he trying to convince himself?
Yeah.
Um, it's definitely something I've questioned the last several years, but
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
definitely, yeah.
And I think the reason I asked you to share that is speaking with other spouses, sometimes they'll say, I asked my significant other and they said no.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they still have symptoms of other
Mhm.
things going on. Or to your point, my husband or my wife is a Christian, they would never do that. And I think that's the little bubble that we as spouses sometimes put ourselves in because that's what we want to hear. And to
Yeah.
your point, maybe it's what they want us to hear. We need to definitely accept what they're saying and believe them to be true. I'm not saying that we want to
Yeah.
call them liars, but also paying attention to those words and those symptoms, even if they're telling you, I'm fine, or I would never do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh. So let's talk about the day that everything kind of changed for you.
Mhm.
And again, I want you to only share what you're comfortable with and what you want families to know about that day and that moment.
Yeah, so I think something I want people to know is that that moment wasn't just a moment for me. It was
Mhm.
the dividing line between the life I had and I loved, and now this life that I'm being forced to live and survive. It's something I never asked for, something I never imagined, especially not 4 months postpartum and just turned 26 years old.
Mhm.
Nobody expects to lose their spouse
Mhm.
ever, but at 26 years old nonetheless. And in that time, when the two officers came, there was so much said, but I wasn't comprehending, I wasn't understanding, I was trying to make excuses. All I can
Mhm.
really remember is saying over and over, like, no, we just had a baby. Like, he's
Mhm.
supposed to come home. Like, he is supposed to come home. We just had a baby. Like, what's going on? Um, and yeah, really for that moment, it obviously was earth shattering and changed the rest of my life. For everybody else, it was just a moment. And
Mhm.
now for me, I'm forced to live with it.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that that is really hard to share. Is there anything that you wish people understood about suicide in law enforcement families?
Yeah, I want people to understand that suicide in law enforcement and just suicide in general isn't because somebody is weak. It's,
Mhm.
they've had to be strong for too long. These men and women are looked at to be the people that others call when they need something, that they're the ones people depend on. They're not the ones asking for help. Um, that these officers just fear being seen as, broken in a profession
Mhm.
where they're taught to be strong and that it's not okay to not be okay. And I
Mhm.
really want to shift that narrative.
Mhm. Absolutely. It's the stigma, right? The
Yeah.
stigma that they come back from the trauma, whatever they see. And if any of us really think about that, like that's not normal. When one tragedy happens, it's hard for people to recover. But for our law enforcement officers, they're trying to recover sometimes multiple times in a shift. And so what you described is exactly what they're feeling. They feel like people are going to view them as weak. And so all of that leads to the stigma.
Yeah. And they should just be seen as human. I
Mhm.
think they need to be seen as themselves first and then law enforcement afterwards. I mean, that's what we do for everybody else. I feel like other people's jobs don't what's the word?
Don't follow them home.
Yeah, yeah, I guess.
Mhm.
And I want people to know that, these suicides aren't just statistics. These are our husbands, our wives, our parents. I mean, some people's
Mhm.
children. P- like
Mhm.
these people deserve to come home at the end of their shift, and when they come home, they deserve to have a safe, open place for honest communication.
Mhm. Something you said is most occupations, not all, but most occupations, at the end of the day, you get to go home and kind of take a deep breath and go, that meeting was hard today, but it's over with.
Yeah,
But they never leave their work behind. They're always bringing it home and it's different. But to your point, they're human beings first and foremost.
yeah,
Their brains are wired just like ours, which is hard to process when bad things happen. And they are heroes, but they're not cartoon character heroes that we see on a cartoon. They are
yeah,
heroes that are struggling.
exactly.
Yeah. So let's kind of move into maybe a little bit about what you wish you would have known back then.
Yeah, I wish I'd have been told it wasn't my fault. Um,
Mhm.
Suicide widows carry a lot of guilt. And I think that's because everybody's looking for a reason. And there's not just one reason. And they want to point fingers. And unfortunately, that typically gets pointed to the spouse. Like, how didn't you know? Like, how can you be
Mhm.
married to somebody and live with somebody every day and not know that they were struggling?
Mhm.
Um, I would want somebody, yes, to tell me it wasn't my fault, that just because I was distracted with a new baby and caught up in everyday life, like
Mhm.
Jared still has to take some of the responsibility, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, I think that's a major thing I wish I would have been told.
Along that same lines, you talked a little bit about this, but I want you to talk directly to the spouse right now and tell them what are some signs that they need to recognize that at the time you couldn't name and they felt maybe weird, but looking back, it would have maybe changed how you dealt with things.
Yeah, I would say definitely take notice of any sort of disassociation and drinking and to trust your gut. It's easier to ask for forgiveness from your spouse, to speak
Mhm.
up on their behalf if they're not willing to. And sometimes you have to do the hard thing. Looking back, I so wish I paid more attention, and I don't care if Jared would have been mad that I like went to his superior and was like, "You know what? He's struggling." Um I think spouses need to understand that their job their job is also to protect their spouse, and if this is the way they can do it, I think they should definitely do it.
Speaking up, absolutely. What advice would you give to families to raise concern to their spouse, maybe without feeling like they're betraying their loved one? Because sometimes I feel like that's what it's all about. Like, we don't want to say something to them or to maybe one of their friends or maybe one of their peers because we as spouses have been told to stay quiet, right?
Yeah.
Don't get my badge taken from me. How do you think families can raise that concern without feeling like they're betraying their loved one?
Um, honestly, like, you can't worry about that. I know
Mhm.
you might think you're gonna upset them or make things worse, but silence doesn't protect them.
Mhm.
And that's unfortunately cut and dry, the realistic answer.
Yeah.
I You can't be afraid of them. And honestly, if it came down to it, I would choose to have my husband home with no badge and no gun than to be at work suffering.
It's a valid point.
Yeah,
If
maybe I
it's the
wasn't the best
difference.
person.
No, I mean, if that's the difference of having your husband or not having
Yeah,
your husband, I don't know that I've ever thought about that. And you're absolutely correct. It's a valid point. And you're right. There is no shame in having a support system or having people that, you as a spouse can call on and say, "Hey, I think something's off with your significant other. Can you maybe talk to them because they're not talking to me?" One of the things I've learned is that the law enforcement officer doesn't always want to share that with the person that they love, whether it's their
yeah,
family or their spouse or their girlfriend or fiance, because they don't want us to carry those burdens. So reaching out to somebody else and going, "Hey, connect with them," is definitely an option. And I love what you said. You need to do it.
yeah.
Don't worry about it. Just do it.
I'm not saying you need to go and speak to their boss. Just speak to somebody you know they're close with, somebody that
Right.
you know they're not going to be blabbing all their problems around to the entire department. And I think that's just a good place to start.
Yeah.
And if you have to escalate it, you have to.
Yeah. So let's move into a little bit about the hope, the healing process, and your advocating for mental health. What keeps you advocating and speaking out today?
I keep speaking out because I don't want the silence to take anyone else. That's the main thing. And I speak out because behind the uniform and the badge was a man that I loved. His life was way more than the way it ended. I
Mhm.
don't think nearly 22 years of service should be just forgotten because
Mhm.
of, you know, the way he died.
Mhm.
Um, and another reason is just that, like, law enforcement officers have been taught to be tough and to push through, and I really want to change that narrative. I
Mhm.
want them to have permission to be honest with themselves, with their spouses, with everyone. It gives them a chance to openly discuss and just show that they're human. It's okay
Mhm.
to be struggling,
Mhm.
but you don't have to do it alone.
Thank you for advocating that message. And thank you for taking this journey and really spinning something that has been such a tragedy for you and your family and taking that to fuel helping others. Can you share maybe just a little bit how maybe connecting with other families, other law enforcement has helped with your healing?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely been a positive uh for me and my family. It's really such a relief knowing that other people understand. I mean, it's
Mhm.
not something you wish anybody would understand, but having that sort of support. I mean, I have friends all over the country now, from different
Mhm.
organizations that I talk to, I see periodically, and, like, if I'm having a bad day or something's bothering me, I know I can text them and they're gonna know exactly what I'm feeling. They might not always know what to say,
Yeah.
but they're gonna understand it, and just, knowing you're not alone is so so much help in itself. Also, these friends I've made have children who have become friends with my children, and when you have a bond like this, these kids are linked for life.
Mhm.
They will be each other's biggest support. I'm
Mhm.
I'm sure of that. And I'm just really glad that not only myself but my kids have people that eventually they will be able to lean on.
I love what you said that in the moments where I feel like I'm alone, it's so helpful to talk to others that are going through the same thing that I am to really feel like my emotions or my feelings are valid and I'm not
Yeah.
alone. I think that's one thing that us as law enforcement, and I'm going to speak for myself, but I think a lot of people share the same. It is hard connecting and interacting and engaging with other spouses of law enforcement. And I think sometimes we don't want to face the reality of what we're seeing. Our
Mhm.
schedules are chaotic. We're busy with our kids, with our own careers, with our own occupations. But yet, when things happen, like maybe just a bad call that our spouses go on, or in your case, something more tragic happens, we've got to have that network of people that are around us. And sometimes spouses of law enforcement, we don't come together before a crisis happens. And I love what you said, which is we all need that. We
Yeah.
need those people, whether it's, overcoming a death or overcoming a bad call. That's something that we need to do for each other.
Yeah, I really wish more departments would focus on the family aspect of it,
Yeah.
cuz in like previous conversations we've had, just through dispatching and being married to a law enforcement officer, I didn't know anybody's wives, or
Hmm.
spouses in general. We That wasn't a thing. There wasn't, cookouts or Christmas parties really to get to know
Hmm.
them. And
Hmm.
since Jared's death, I have made some really amazing friends through actually a different law enforcement agency, and even though they haven't experienced the same loss, they do understand what it's like to be home and waiting and hoping and praying that your spouse comes
Yeah.
home at the end of their shift.
So if you're a spouse right now, wherever you are in the country, if you're not involved or engaged with other law enforcement officer spouses, start a group, find a group.
Yeah.
If you already have a group, extend an invitation to somebody on that law enforcement department that doesn't show up, that isn't included. Maybe they just don't know. I recently just started a support group in Ohio. Everybody and everyone is welcome. And we've had such meaningful conversations of just the things that we deal with on a daily basis. And it's just so much better to do life with others that are walking the same walk that you are and that can truly understand what you're going through. So please, if you're listening, take action on that and just get you some support because you need it just as much as they do.
For sure.
So, one final question here before we kind of wrap up our time. If you could sit across from a spouse right now, and you really are, it's just through a video,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But if you're sitting across from a spouse who is quietly worried, maybe it's something that you said or something that you described that now they're thinking, oh my gosh, I see that in my spouse. Or maybe something that's just been heavy on their mind. What would you say to them as a final last thought?
I would tell them that there's no right time or perfect moment to speak up if you're feeling something, no matter how insignificant it might seem. ask your partner about it.
Mhm.
But also the spouses need to take care of themselves as well. And
Mhm.
that could look different, but loving people who struggle with their mental health can feel very, very isolating. Um,
Mhm.
and I know some might feel the fear of helplessness, but
Mhm.
they deserve support as well. So, like you said, whether that's getting involved with a spouse's support group or even going to counseling, like it's nothing to be
Mhm.
ashamed of. And honestly, it should be encouraged.
And I am so thankful, Anna, for you sharing your story. I know that that's difficult, and that's not something that I'm sure you want to relive. So thank you for sharing it and be an advocate for first responders. It is an important topic. It is a topic that we all need to start screaming from the rooftops that mental health and law enforcement is not just a word. And
Yeah.
the word stigma isn't just a word. There is big, true meaning behind it, and there's huge consequences if we don't do something about it. You sharing your story today, I know it's going to reach somebody out there. Hopefully, it changes their life. Hopefully, it saves their spouse. And I'm just so proud of you and the work that you're doing and how you've taken this crisis and you've used it for good. So, thank you so much for joining our podcast today.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I'm hoping that it reaches even one person. If I help
Mhm.
save one person's life, I've done my job.
Thank you so much for joining our episode today. This topic, let's be honest, it's heavy. It's something that none of us want to think about or never want to imagine. I hope there's something in this episode that spoke directly to you. And if you know somebody that is a spouse or a family member of a law enforcement that needs to hear this message today, please share it with them. Being silent does not save lives. We have to fight this stigma together, one break at a time. I hope you'll join me in future episodes of Code 44, where we will talk more about the signs. We will talk more about the things that we can do to get our loved ones help. And we'll hear from more stories just like Anna. Before I go, let me say a quick prayer. Our Heavenly Father, thank you so much today for Anna sharing her story. Lord, we pray that it reaches individuals that need to hear the story. Lord, please be with our loved ones to know that we as spouses and family are here to help them through the trouble and that they are not alone. Lord, please be with the spouses that just feel so much right now. Give them the heart to recognize the things that they are seeing, the courage to speak up, and the awareness of where they can get help. Lord, we pray these things in your name. Amen.